Grazie mille, ma mi dispiace molto perché parlo in inglese, perché il mio italiano non ancora è buono, è molto brutto, un po', perché ho iniziato un anno fa, ma forse il prossimo anno. Allora, the Museo Egizio, founded in 1824, houses one of the largest collections of Egyptian antiquities worldwide. It is devoted to the promotion of the scientific research through a sustainable long-term planning of a broad range of activities that will enhance the museum's role as educational player for its communities. Since 2004, the management of the collection, owned by the Italian state, has been entrusted to the non-profit Fondazione Museo Egizio di Torino, the very first experiment in Italy of a museum management tool with the participation of the private sector. On April 1st, 2015, the Museo Egizio has inaugurated a brand new exhibition path, the result of a 50 million euro project supported by the founding members, a 5-year-long refurbish, restoration and safety improvement of the 17th century building where the museum is located since its foundation. The exhibition space has doubled in size and includes 5 floors, 15 rooms for 3,300 objects on permanent display. With these renovations, the museum had to come to terms with its long history on one side, and on the other with the widely spread perception of being a container of antiquities, dusty and old-fashioned, to actively decide to transform itself into an institution serving society and territory development through actions covering different areas: research, conservation, national and international partnerships, touristic promotions of the region, marketing and management, and ethical as well as social cultural issues. In accordance with its renewed identity and mission, the Museo Egizio has launched an overall scientific program, including the production of temporary exhibitions, socially relevant projects devoted to specific targets, and research projects in cooperation with the international scientific scholarship. Among those are projects which aim to restore written cultural heritage and make it virtually accessible across borders and disciplinary boundaries by employing digital information technologies. Especially in recent years, scholarly communities as well as the general public have been requesting open access to museum collections, prompting institutions to offer online catalogues, mostly of selected objects, in some cases even of their complete collections. Major Egyptian papyrus collections, however, have so far been extremely slow in adopting to this open access approach. This was also true for the Museo Egizio, despite its housing one of the largest collections of Egyptian antiquities worldwide. Not again. These antiquities include a vast number of papyrus manuscripts, mainly dating to the so-called Ramesside period, which is a period under 1300 to 1000 before. They constitute the largest and historically most important papyrus archive of the pre-Hellenistic Egypt period. The manuscripts range in content from documentary texts, such as necropolis or temple administration texts, juridical texts, to literary, ritual texts, magical, and of course funerary texts. Almost all of the texts are written in hieratic, which is the cursive form of the hieroglyphic script, and it's either written in the classical or the late Egyptian language. Most of the papyri in our collection were acquired for the museum in 1824 by the government of the Piedmont from Bernardino Drovetti, the French consul in Egypt at the time. Drovetti had collected his antiquities mainly in the mountains west of the Nile, near modern Luxor, which is ancient Thebes. Western Thebes is where the Ramesside pharaohs had been buried and had built their mortuary temples. Indeed, many of the Turin papyri mention these temples as well as matters dealing with the construction of the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. Most of the manuscripts in Turin probably belonged to members of the administration of the royal necropolis and are highly likely to originate from the village of Del Medina, which housed the families of the workmen who built the royal tombs. The Drovetti lot consists of several thousands of papyrus fragments. Among these, some approximately 500 larger ensembles have been already assembled and given inventory numbers. Nevertheless, published pictures or photos or facsimiles of the original texts are absolutely rare. Some of these documents are more or less complete manuscript, such as the first one. However, there are thousands of tiny fragments stored unmounted in cardboard folders or in cellophane foil, which belong either to these ensembles or to yet other unidentified texts. Despite having been part of the museum collection for almost 2 centuries, and despite their historical importance, the approximately 17,000 papyrus fragments are neither stored according to the state-of-the-art guidelines for the conservation of papyri, nor documented in the existing museum database. In consequence of this, the important material has remained unknown and unpublished, except for a very limited number of documents, and even these are accessible only to Egyptologists. Until recently, scholars were not given color images or offered the opportunity to study the documents extensively. Information about the thousands of undocumented fragments which belong to other papyri were available only to a few scholars. As to the general public, it is more or less completely unaware of the existence of Turin's papyrus archive and of its importance. Most of the visitors to the Museo Egizio pass by the administrative manuscripts on display on the walls without taking hardly any notice of them. They only stop to look at papyri bearing color illustrations or those that are prominently displayed in the middle of the rooms, such as, just to give some examples, the so-called Turin King List, also known as the Royal Canon, which is a fragmentary papyrus containing the list with Egyptian kings, or the Turin Juridical Papyrus, which is a record of a conspiracy against King Ramses III by his second wife. The satiric or erotic papyrus, giving a glimpse of the humor of the inhabitants of the settlement of Del Medina, or such as the Turin Gold Mine Papyrus, which is the second, actually not the first, this is the second oldest known topographical map of ancient Egypt. Or the so-called Turin Strike Papyrus, the earliest record strikes in world history under Ramses III. We even have evidence for census records from Del Medina, which is quite exceptional before the Greco-Roman period. These manuscripts are beyond doubt among the most important written sources ever come down to us from ancient Egypt. But their historical significance becomes obvious only in the context in which the manuscript was produced. The curatorial staff in a museum is not always single-handed capable of providing the necessary knowledge to visitors. They must necessarily rely on specialized researchers. To answer the questions of curators and visitors, however, researchers in Egyptian history, language, philology, art, etc., need to have access to all the available data in order to get a picture that is as complete as possible. Disciplines such as philology and papyrology are in special need of digital tools and repositories in order to document, process, and publicize information about papyrus material, the ancient texts they carry, and of course their context. While papyrology is already in the digital vanguard, Egyptian philology, and most notably the study of hieratic texts such as those, has so far been extremely slow in catching up. And this is what we are about to change in the Museo Egizio. Starting already in September 2016, a network has been developed that combines the Egyptological and also the IT expertise of the Museo Egizio with that of the universities of Basel, Copenhagen, Leiden, Liège, Leipzig, Munich and Uppsala. We formulated the following objective for the project, which is first the conservation and consolidation of the papyrus fragments, which are stored in hundreds of cardboard covers. It's about recording the 17,000 fragments from the cardboard covers as well as the already inventoried papyri by entering metadata about their physical features and the writing and drawings they bear in a newly created online database, which will be available to both the general public and scholars worldwide. Processing high-resolution digital images of the material and systematically linking them with open metadata in order to enable scholars to work collaboratively on the material and provide a straightforward publication outlet for scholars and the general public. Reconstructing individual manuscripts in the Turin collection by digitally joining fragments with the help of the online database and using digital rearrangement as a template for their physical reconstruction. Integrating the texts into a richly annotated corpus of ancient Egyptian texts and providing archaeological, institutional and personal context to the documents. And of course, the communication of the Egyptological research results to the general public and integrating them in temporary and permanent exhibition by means of virtual reconstructions. And the four stakeholders will benefit from the resource and impact of the project. Egyptologists, first, and historians, who will have online access to the digital repository of written material culture and will be offered access to an online platform where scholars can collaborate in the virtual reconstruction and edition of the papyri. The digital humanities as a result of the implementation of a new technological tool for the documentation and reintegration of the past. And of course the Museo Egizio, whose tangible and virtual cultural heritage will be saved into a digital repository, enabling the staff to manage and preserve the material in the long term on the one hand, and on the other to display the scattered material digitally reunited in a virtual museum. The general public, of course, insofar as maximum value will be derived from deploying information about the complete workflow and its outcomes in the physical and virtual museum in order to make both the papyrus themselves and the research done on them understandable and accessible to the non-Egyptologist public in any place and at any time. However, reconstructing Egyptian manuscripts is like assembling a jigsaw puzzle. It is not possible, however, to spread the individual pieces on a table and try to connect them manually due to the fragile condition of the papyri and the often not existing space in the storerooms. Furthermore, when we assemble a puzzle, we start from a set of pieces that certainly belong together. In the case of a papyrus document in an archive such as ours, instead pieces belonging to the same manuscript have to be singled out from thousands of fragments belonging to hundreds of different documents. The identification of fragments of the same papyrus roll is based on material features such as the patterns of the fibers of the papyrus or its color, on the text, content and layout, and quite often on the paleography. This is the handwriting and calligraphy and all sorts of scribal practices. The distinction between material and writing is of fundamental importance. The physical medium itself is crucial because the evaluation of each papyrus as a material object can often be as important for its interpretation and contextualization as the text written upon it. An Egyptologist's memory is unable to retain all these features of the material and writing for thousands of papyrus fragments. He or she must therefore rely on a relational tool that automatically suggests possible joins between fragments of papyrus documents on the basis of collected and structured metadata. The central concept of the Papyrus project is thus the development of a unique and innovative platform. The platform will be an open access repository and eventually also made available for other European collections of manuscripts. It shall facilitate all stages in the workflow. It will be multi-user, enabling the community of experts based at different European locations to contribute data, and responsive, meaning that it will be usable on any electronic device. Furthermore, at the front end, it will automatically adapt to the needs of different users, from the interested layman to the highly specialized philologist and papyrologist. Following the conservation of the material and the data acquisition, the three main tasks of the workflow, which is the documentation, the connection, and the contextualization, correspond respectively to three levels in the so-called TOT data model. The TOT data model is a conceptual data model developed for inscribed material from ancient Egypt that is fully compatible with the standards of the International Council of Museums for the recording of cultural heritage. The three key elements of the TOT data model, the object, in our case this is a papyrus fragment, the document, in our case a papyrus roll, reconstituted from several objects, and the witness, which is a term designating one or more texts written on a document. This is what I should explain briefly, is that especially in the case of the papyri in the Museo Egizio, the papyri are written most likely on both sides, recto and verso. But the texts written on recto and verso are different. So this means on this example here, we have on the back side of the gold map papyrus, we have 12 texts written by 3 scribes. And the texts are different. We have hymns, we have literary texts, we have administration texts, we have juridical texts, and we have drawings which are templates for coffins. All of them are collected on one document, one papyrus, but in general they were recomposed out of 45 fragments. Each of these elements is treated as a different witness in our database. Although developed for inscribed material, the platform could have an impact on the digital reconstruction of reused and non-written artifacts on archaeological sites and architectural works. The theoretical framework based on the distinction between object, document, and witness could find application to all the dispersed material culture housed in Europe. The conceptual object could be a potsherd or a block of stone. The reconstructed document in those cases would be a vessel, a temple, or even a church. The witness could be the depiction of a deity or the image of a saint on the walls of the building. This approach is innovative insofar as by distinguishing these layers, it makes full account of the biography of material culture from the moment of its first production to its final use. I would like to present to you briefly the first development of the database, because since December last year, December 2017, we deployed, let's say, like an alpha, what's more or less the beta version of the database. What you see here is really it's the back end of the database. It's not the front end. So this is not the database how it will be visible for the general public, since this is not attractive enough. But what I wanted to show is just how we, the colleagues, this means the colleagues I was just mentioning, are working right now. This is where we put the data. I will show you just a test entry. The database is accessible already now for 14 scholars. And I will show you for the 14 scholars. What we do is we scan the object, as I said, in high resolution, and we put the objects in the database, giving general information which is normal for museum database, information about location, measurements, etc. What is quite of importance is that all fields in the database are searchable. This is why we have, which is for you as non-Egyptologists, maybe a little bit quite detailed, all this kind of information here about how a papyrus was constructed. Because when you see a papyrus, you know that a papyrus was not one document, it was different sheets of papyrus which were glued together. And actually it's quite of importance to see how they were glued, on which side you can see the fibers, etc. All these kind of features are important to find joints of fragments. And this is why we are quite detailed about how to collect the information, what kind of sheet joint we have. Is it on the right side, is it on the left side, etc. This is actually quite a lot of work, which is not of interest for the normal Egyptologist. But if you really find a smaller object and you want to know where it might join to, you can search this kind of features and find hopefully some results on this. It's also important to know if this was a reused text or not. What kind of folds do you have? How was it folded, the papyrus? All these kind of features is what we document here. But this is something what you can do with a papyrus, but you can also do the same with parchment, with paper, etc. So this is, in this case, is not new. We collect all kind of information also about the object when it's already known for a while. But what is of importance is the field writing here, which would be more or less similar to the witness field. As I said, a papyrus has two sides. And what you show here is this is already a papyrus which we assembled, the fragments. We upload the pictures here. You can zoom into 65%. It's not 100%. So this means the scholars can zoom in here. And this is what we call the navigation platform, because here we can write comments on certain things, which you can also, this is where colleagues can communicate on specific passages here. For example, also to show this is actually the correct position, because this was a reconstructed position. The picture here you see it's reconstructed in a virtual way, because the situation as it is now in the museum is this one here. So the fragments are collected in 3 different frames. The writing field is, and this is what I meant with the output, is important here is the text content. Because the text content is, of course, this is what is of importance for the general public later to see what are the texts about. And this is where we collect the information about what kind of text do we have, what persons are mentioned, the titles, etc. We have a translation here. This is actually, as I said, it's more like a beta version or an alpha version, because the database is in English for now, but it will be later in English and Italian. And the translation of the text will be in 4 languages, in German, English, French, and Italian, which are the Egyptological languages. So you see here the edition of the text for the Egyptologist. And what you also have here, which is of importance, is for example, hieratic, this is, just to show this script here is hieratic. This is, as you can see, it's not hieroglyphic script. Actually, not all Egyptologists can read this kind of handwriting. This means that even for my colleagues, we have to prevent something to give them something they can read. So this means hieroglyphs are, Egyptologists are, they are supposed to read hieroglyphs. This is why we transcribe the hieratic script into a hieroglyphic script, and from a hieroglyphic script into English, German, Italian, French, etc. And this is but also something which might be attractive for the general public, since this is something they can relate to hieroglyphs in a way. Whereas hieratic, and this is actually the main problem in all the museums, is when you see this kind of text on display, this is not attractive. Because people cannot relate to anything on this text, because they cannot read, they don't understand what this is about. So the database now is, we collect all the information, but in the future what we want to do is, also with this kind of Google navigation tool, is to give the possibility to click on certain aspects and then to have a translation of the certain aspects. But as I said before, this is something we're talking here about unpublished material. So in order to give this kind of information, we need to collect the information before. So, and this is one of the main tasks in our museum, but as I said, in all museums with papyrus collection, is to make texts like that attractive or interested to the public when there are no drawings on it. So I think, so this is more or less the alpha version. What we also want to do in the second step, it's already under construction, but it's not yet implemented, is to have a so-called digital light table. In the database, for now, is we upload the pictures. And you can open the pictures, you can zoom in. But what you cannot do, and you cannot join the fragments online. But in the future, what we want to have, we want to implement a tool such as Photoshop, for example. This means that what we do now is when we have an object, or we have objects, we put them in Photoshop and we start to join them, which would be the resort. And this kind of the Photoshop, the light table, this is something we want to implement in the database in order that colleagues can already take the fragments which are in the database and join them digitally, virtually in the database. And this is also a tool which we would like to make in a way also visible and attractive to the public to show how philologists are working. Upon completion of this project, the immediate result will be the recomposition of a huge cultural and digital heritage, offering a potential for the reconstruction of the past that will also be valuable for the present and the future. The digital papyrus archive, provided completely with metadata about physical features, writing and drawings, will enhance our knowledge and provide the basis for further research that would previously have been impossible. The Turin project is dealing with papyrus material written in one language, covering a period of about 250 years and stored in a single collection. By focusing on a settlement such as the Medina, which is attested over a rather short period of time, by a waste written material culture, the picture of the microhistory of the everyday life of a local community will be defined in far more detail. In a way, the Medina is for ancient Egypt like Pompeii is for Rome, in a way, because the importance of the Medina, not just for 250 years, but in general for a period of 3,000 years, is unique, since we have, as I said, a very detailed documentation, written documentation, but also documentation of non-written material culture of this specific settlement, which is, as I said before, it's really unique before the Hellenistic period. The wealth of details about the everyday life of the Egyptians contained in these manuscripts potentially holds great appeal for the layperson. The website at the front end of the project will provide vivid narratives targeted at the non-specialists, supported by videos and photography. These narratives will focus on ancient Egyptian society and Ramesside Egypt, on the one hand, and on the other provide a backstage view where users can learn about the project and its workflow. The first to benefit from the project will be people working in Egyptology or with ancient Egyptian culture worldwide, such as curators, but also teachers, students and investigators affiliated to hundreds of museums, universities and other research institutions. To these stakeholders, the platform will make fully available online a vast and invaluable corpus of hitherto largely inaccessible manuscripts. The navigation and study of this vast and complex material will be greatly facilitated by visual tools and rich metadata appended to each object, document and text. The project will actually have an important impact insofar as it will make available digital humanities technology, allowing scholars to make the transition from insular and isolated work to cross-border and cross-disciplines collaboration. The platform will be finally able to link scholars by providing them with a virtual light table and enable them to study the material from their home institution in order to reassemble dispersed corpora. In the specific case of the collection of the Museo Egizio, instead of having isolated philologists and papyrologists, each doing their own research on a limited number of papyrus fragments, being unable, due to the limitations of time and space, to tackle the whole mass of fragments in the Museo Egizio, we will develop a collaborative software that will allow scholars from all over the world to study our papyri, find joins, reconstruct new texts, and add to our understanding enormously to enlarge the material. Those be available to virtually reconstruct, study, and classify the most important administrative archive from pre-Hellenistic Egypt. This corpus will be made available nearly 200 years after the manuscripts entered the museum. In itself, this move away from closed archives to open data, actively enabling experts and amateurs alike to assist. This is already a major step forward in the domain of historical archiving and digital humanities. The Museo Egizio would be among the first museums with Egyptian culture material which take the distance from granting permissions to publish individual manuscripts to one single scholar, a policy which typically results in only a few publications in proportions to the amount of papyri. I think with this, grazie mille.